So in this week's episode of Fix the Mix, we're going to do a few things differently and see how they work out. You may have noticed, I'm on camera for a change. I'm also going to be looking to the left of the screen a fair bit. I have my script pulled up over there. I'm pretty terrible on camera with that one. Don't be surprised if there are a lot of jump cuts. I'd like to apologize for not uploading a Fix the Mix episode last week. When I sat down to record for it, a song came out instead. Then, when I finished that song and tried to get to recording it, another song came instead. So, I uploaded those songs. A link to one of them should be right there, I think. And though it was definitely fun to do a Eurobeat song, it's a little hard to monetize music on YouTube. The algorithm just hates anything under 10 minutes. I might even start uploading 3 songs per video on Saturdays to hit that 10-minute mark, and put ad breaks between each track. I'm trying to do this full time, after all. If multiple songs in one video is something you guys would be up for, I'm definitely willing to put in the extra effort to release them like that. I could even upload them together like that, and then release the tracks one at a time across the following 3 days, so that you can put your favorites into your music playlists without having to save all 3 songs. I literally had this idea while writing the script, so I'm more than open to feedback, and not attached if you don't like it. Anyway, onto the actual subject matter for this week's episode. I had a few options I was considering remastering for this one. While I was going over the list I've put together so far, one song in particular stood out to me. Not because the original was particularly bad, but because I think I can take this one from good to amazing. I'm talking about one of the few fully orchestral fight tracks I've done so far. One of the only 2, in fact. This time, it's Hall of Heroes. I remember when I got in touch with Akila to coordinate the style we wanted the Asuna vs. Ori fight soundtrack to be in. She gave me some reference song. I don't remember what it was, though, because I already had my heart set on something else. I wanted to do something like the music for Hollow Bastion from the original Kingdom Hearts game. What came from that was an arpeggiated piano melody that repeated at odd intervals, over strings that played whole notes to mask what time signature this track was really in. Although the display today will show the time signature as 6/8, the song is actually written in 9/8, which means that for every phrase of music, you can tap your finger 9 times before a new measure starts. This is a pretty uncommon time signature, especially for a fight soundtrack, and I'm pretty happy I was able to make it work. I still have no idea why I didn't just write it into the program as 9/8 though, instead of making it 6/8 and working against the computer. Some of the engineering decisions I made years ago confused the hell out of me. Since this track is actually pretty short, I'll just go ahead and play the whole thing now and break down what I like and dislike all in one go. The mix for this one is pretty good, but the synthetic orchestra I was using at the time doesn't really capture me the way I feel it should. The song is named Hall of Heroes, after all. Right now it feels more like a Hall of Unproven Adventurers, but it's been a few years. Those guys have seen some shit, and they're finally ready to don the hero moniker. I think the first angle of attack at this will be to take those sustained strings and make them a lot wider. They're sonically the center of the mix, and they help it feel grounded among the more chaotic elements like the piano and staccato violins. Sounds cool, but I think I can make them even thicker and more powerful if I layer them with some low brass. That really rounds out the low end of those sustain sections. I think we can polish up the higher end with some of my new choir patches, and really add that angelic tone you'd expect in a hall for heroes. Those choirs always give me chills. Next, let's tackle the violin arpeggios. They're currently layered with the piano, and I think it's cool to have those different sounds playing the same notes to really drive that point home. However, they're kind of fighting for the same space in the song and ended up stepping on each other quite a bit. I think I'll take these violins and make them nice and wide, like I did with the lower string section. This ought to open the center of the mix up nicely for that piano to shine through. I'd say that did what I wanted it to, but I think we can take this same arpeggio just a little further if we bring in some woodwinds and place them between the super wide strings and the centered piano part. I'm shooting for a super rich lead line running the course of this track. If it doesn't feel like an army of angels are blasting this as Jesus and Buddha have a friendly sparring match, my job isn't done. Speaking of friendly blows being traded, the old timpani drum just sounds dead and flat. It's supposed to be this huge beatdown of percussive impact, and instead it feels like someone is politely tapping on it in the back of the room. Let's see if I have something to replace that while keeping the percussion tuned. Cool, this has a lot more punch to it. I think this should amp things up quite a bit, but what if I layered in some huge bass drum hits here and there where they'd be most impactful? Okay, that's sounding pretty powerful. With how big these drums are sounding now, though, the snare drum on the original track feels pretty feeble. I remember I was shooting for what sounded like a snare drum line, so I layered some snare samples together, all slightly off from each other. Unfortunately, the samples I had at the time forced me to choose between big studio sound snares and small drumline sound snares. This is no longer the case. I'll just show you. Alright, now let's hear the snare in context with the other drums. Great! That really brings a lot more energy than the old drum line. Finally, let's hear it all together. I just need to make some final tweaks to the mix to make sure everything has enough space to be heard now that it's all so much bigger sounding. Here's the time lapse of me wrapping up Hall of Heroes 2019. Hey guys, as usual, if you haven't already, please consider subscribing to the channel. I'm doing music full-time these days, and every view really makes a difference. My commissions are always open as well, if you'd like a custom song for your animation, story, original character, or as a present for someone, including yourself. Feel free to use the email listed in the About section on my channel. Keeping it short and sweet in the time-lapse this time, let's get straight to the newly fixed mix. Now that feels worthy of being played in a Hall of Heroes. You may have noticed I doubled the length of the song. To me, it felt like just 80 seconds of this was more of a tease than anything, especially with how good it turned out. So, Hall of Heroes 2019 extended? Nah. To me, this feels more like the length it should have always been. That's it for this week. Thanks again for tuning in, and I'll be back next week with your next fix. The